It's America's worst nightmare, an all-SEC national championship game. We'll break it down next. How did we get here, and how do we live with ourselves? That's coming up next on SEC Country Live. Well, hey everybody, Happy New Year, good to see you. SEC Country Live brought to you by AT&T, mobilizing your world. My name is Hans Heiser. I'm in for Brandon Adams, who we're going to talk to here about 20 minutes after the hour. Got to think Brandon's feeling pretty good about himself after the big win. Mr. Brandon Walker is filling in for Big Mike Johnson, who's in his truck on his way back from the Sugar Bowl. He too is feeling pretty good about himself in what was a memorable day yesterday for the SEC in college football.
It really was. You called it America's national nightmare, but down here it's more like a dream. You know, when the playoffs came out, we wondered if this were possible. There were times yesterday I said, maybe, no, it's not. But it is indeed happening. Georgia against Alabama, an all-SEC national title for the second time in 6 years.
I don't even know where to start with this. We got plenty to get to. We're going to talk to Brandon Adams at 3:20. One of the things that I want to get your viewer reaction to, and we're going to take a lot of your comments today on Facebook Live, and I'm curious I got a buddy of mine who's a diehard Florida fan. He refuses to answer my phone calls this morning. He has not responded to a text. I want to know who he's rooting for in this game. If you're an SEC school fan, you're one of the other 12 schools, what's your rooting interest? I mean, are you just so tired of the Alabama train that you'd like to see somebody new get a shot? I think some people fall into that. Are you a SEC East supporter? And I'll use the Florida Gator fan as a reference point, saying, well, maybe I'll root for the East as opposed to the West because they're my divisional foe. I don't know. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Hit us up on Facebook Live. But the title game is set. We know the story. Vegas line is out. We'll talk about that coming up in just a minute. But 8 o'clock next Saturday, or next Monday rather, national championship game, Alabama and Georgia. I mean, how did we get here?
We got here by an incredible gutsy performance by Georgia and a dominating performance by Alabama. We expected Alabama's defense to be better. I don't know if anybody expected it to be that good, and we got here by Georgia manning up in circumstances that were really rough. I mean, they did not play well in the first half, but Georgia played like champions play in the second half. That's how we got here.
That Alabama defense, the job they did against Clemson last night, absolutely incredible. A costly injury yet again at linebacker. We'll talk about that in just a sec, but I do just want to briefly recap some of the other SEC bowl games that we didn't have a chance to talk about as we were off over the holiday week. And of course, we'll start with Mississippi State because, heck, they won the game. You're a Mississippi State guy. They didn't have their quarterback. I think you just tipped the cap to the coaching staff and the players for being ready to play.
It was very surprising. An interim coaching staff after Dan Mullen leaves. Nick Fitzgerald breaks his ankle in the Egg Bowl. You got a freshman going up against a Heisman winner in Lamar Jackson. And Mississippi State surprises everybody. Got the SEC off the schneid. The SEC was 0-3. Mississippi State got the ball rolling. Very surprising victory for Mississippi State, but a very satisfying one over Louisville.
All right, and also you got the Kentucky. They come up one play too short. Basically the story of their season, Brandon, as they score a touchdown against Northwestern in the final moments of the game. Go for two. I like Stoops' decision to do that. At that point, you're playing with house money, but they come up a little bit short, which is the story of their season. The Ole Miss game, the Florida game, they find a way to pull this one off. You're talking about 3 plays cost them 3 games. It could have been a 10-win Kentucky team.
I agree with you. I like the decision. I mean, it's a bowl game. Let it all hang out. It's the end of the year. What have you got to lose? But Kentucky was that close to some things this year, but they were also that close to not having all that great a year. They were a weird team all season long, and this was a weird bowl game, and losing Northwestern has to be a bitter pill for Kentucky fans to swallow. They were 5-1 at one point.
Right.
We were talking, are they going to be 9-1 when Georgia comes around? Well, they weren't, and they end their season in a poor fashion.
Well, South Carolina gets a surprising victory against Michigan. I think most SEC fans were glad to see Michigan come up on the wrong end of this one. They just rub everybody the wrong way. Anywhere Harbaugh goes, people are going to be rooting against him. Big win for South Carolina. Huge momentum swing going into next year. You're talking about a 9-win football team.
They are 9-4. They've got all the momentum for 2018. The 2 teams in the SEC I just knew were going to lose their bowl games.
One.
Mississippi State and South Carolina.
Right.
And both of them won. And momentum's not a real thing, but it was on the way to being a terrible bowl season for the SEC. Those two teams got it going the right direction, and then Alabama and Georgia knocked it out of the park.
Some great comments coming in. They're coming in so fast on our Facebook page I can't get to them. Some people saying that most people will be pulling for the dogs in this situation just because of, Alabama's success time and time again. One guy, Florida fan, says, I won't watch. I don't care who wins. I hope they both lose.
I think most fans in the SEC, if you've got to pick one, you're going to pick the new kid on the block. You're going to pick the one.
That's how I thought about it.
Alabama's been choking out the SEC for almost 10 years now. They're going for their 5th national title in 9 years. People are tired of it, but hey, how can you be tired of a winner? They have put the conference on their back so many times. Now they have a challenger from within their own conference.
Real quick, couple other bowl games I do want to hit on, Mike. If you could throw that graphic up one more time. Texas A&M, Wake Forest, to call it a shootout would be an understatement. It'll come up a little bit short, but what you do find out, Jimbo coming in, Starkel's the answer at quarterback. They're going to be loaded on offense. By the way, Christian Kirk did announce his declaration today for the NFL. He will not be returning to the Aggies, but they got to get that defense figured out there in College Station.
They got to get a lot of things figured out. They got openings for new weapons on offense. They got openings for a lot of things. I was very disappointed in Texas A&M losing that game. I just don't see how you give up that many points to Wake Forest. But again, it is what it is. For a lot of teams in the SEC, like Texas A&M, like others, this game was just a whose era did it belong to? It didn't belong to Kevin Sumlin. Didn't belong to Jimbo Fisher. Now from here on out, it's Jimbo Fisher's era at Texas A&M. Didn't get off to a great start, but who's going to care in 2 weeks?
All right, let's get going. Rose Bowl time. And what was to me, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That was as good as a football game as I've ever seen in my life, not just because Georgia came out on top, but just the momentum swings early on in this game, Brandon. Georgia was shell-shocked. Mel Tucker's defense was getting pushed around. Baker Mayfield was playing with that swag. Georgia just didn't look like they had any answers. And, you had the big momentum swing coming out of the locker room, going into the locker room, rather, I should say, on the squib kick, which turned out to be the turning point.
I thought for about a quarter and a half, Oklahoma's coaching staff put on a clinic. They had Georgia off balance on both sides of the football, and then Georgia's coaching staff and players seemed to figure it out. They seemed to figure out, hey, we're tougher than these guys. We are more physical than these guys. And the early part of the second half, it was all about that, running it down their throat, getting after Baker Mayfield. And then once they tied the game, it was just a sprint to the finish. A fantastic game. I can't remember a better game. The only game I've heard that can compare to it is the 2006 Rose Bowl.
I thought you were going to come with some kind of Mississippi State game.
I was very much not. But Texas USC back in the 2006 Rose Bowl stands out as maybe the greatest game of all time. This game was every bit that game's equal. I had no rooting interest. I was standing for the last 5 minutes and overtime of this game.
TV ratings through the roof for both games, a 14.2 for the Rose Bowl, a 12.4 for the Sugar Bowl. Let's revisit the decision by Oklahoma to squib kick it. I got up to leave. I said, you know what, there's 6 seconds left in the half. I'm going to go have my cornbread, black-eyed peas, and collard greens for dinner. I'm going to come back, watch the second half, hope Georgia can pull a miracle. I look at the score. They've got 17 points all of a sudden. I text my buddy, I said, how in the world did they get 3 points? I backed up the DVR. What are you thinking in that situation? I'm not being Monday morning quarterback, but just kick it deep.
Just kick it deep.
Right.
Your guy had kicked it out of the end zone every time he kicked off, except for one until that point. I don't understand I did the same thing you did. I left the room. I came back. They're talking about trying the kick. I'm like, trying what kick? Or is it halftime? Is it a competition?
Right.
No, but he kicked, and credit to the kicker, Rodrigo Blankenship, 55 yards.
Money.
In that kind of situation he had already missed. That kick ended up being huge, but it kind of, Oklahoma's coaching staff kind of made several decisions at the end of that first half and then in the second half that played in Georgia's favor, I thought.
Yeah, I thought Lincoln Riley tightened up there in that decision. He's saying, well, he kicked it right at him. Obviously, we wouldn't have done it, but how about the credit there for Coach Chaney? I thought Jim Chaney was under a lot of, scrutiny there in the first half for they stuck with the passing game. They're breaking off these 40, 50-yard runs, and Georgia fans are saying, why not just run the ball? I think you wanted to keep them, open to the idea that you were going to throw the ball. And ultimately, at the end, that was the deciding factor, was Jake Fromm making plays with his arm, not his feet.
I understand the need to stay balanced. That's probably what Jim Chaney was doing. We have to stay balanced or they won't respect the run or they won't respect the pass and they'll be able to stop the run. Well, they never did stop the run. And I think at halftime, the coaches got together and said, hey, listen, until they stop it, we're running the football. And in credit to Jake Fromm, a freshman who's, I guess he's not a freshman anymore, 200-something yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. When it was time in the fourth quarter that he had to make plays, he made them, and that surprised me maybe more than anything.
I think the other curious decision by Lincoln Riley was in the overtime. You know, Georgia gets the ball first.
You've got the Heisman winner.
The field goal. It's 4th and 1. I think, you know, I think they were just revisiting that play at the end of regulation or toward their next to last possession where they had that 3rd and 2, which to me was the play of the game for Georgia. Roquan Smith makes as good a play as you'll see. Actually, he makes them every game. But to force them into that situation, I think that was in his mind still that, man, these linebackers aren't having it on the outside. The option play, I don't know why they kept running that option play. It was hot garbage all day long. But 4th and 1, you got to find a way. QB sneak it. Oklahoma.
I don't know what your play is there. I don't know what your play call is. But in the 3 plays leading up to 4th and 1, they took it out of Baker Mayfield's hands. It was a reverse. There was a couple of runs. I mean, you've got the best player in the country, at least according to some. I think Roquan Smith's probably a better football player than Baker Mayfield. But you've got a great Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Let him win the game. And Oklahoma didn't do that. It seems like the coaching staff kind of shrunk from the moment there in the 4th quarter and overtime. My question to you is, it's been floated out there that late hit or whatever you want to call it, wasn't called, that maybe Baker Mayfield was hurt. Do you believe he could have been a little gimpy after that?
I think so. Plus the flu. Nick Landry just writes in. He says, I love that option play. What are you talking about? I bet Georgia fans did. They didn't get anything on that all game.
They ran it to the short side of the field on 3rd and 2. You run it to the boundary, and Roquan Smith is a great player, and you made it easy for him. And plus the blocker blocked him into the tackle. Roquan Smith, an incredible football player. How about Lorenzo Carter, an incredible football player?
No doubt, man.
The defensive players, when they had to have it on Georgia, I mean, they got embarrassed in the first half. They did. 31 first half points for Oklahoma, and the defensive players, the defensive coaching staff stood up like champions, and now they're going to be playing for a national title.
How about the seniors yesterday for Georgia? You mentioned Lorenzo Carter, the 2 running backs, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, 4 touchdowns. I mean, what can you say about those 2 guys' performance?
Good for Sony Michel.
Right.
I mean, who felt bad for Sony Michel when he fumbled that football?
Everybody.
Everybody in the world. Nobody wanted to see it end like that. Nobody wanted to see it swing like that. So when he got the ball in overtime and turned the corner, I'm like, good for that guy, because Nick Chubb, Sony Michel have been warriors for this team for 4 years. It's great to see guys like that rewarded on this stage.
Now let's talk about what we saw in the other game. Hey, so sure as the sun rises, Alabama shuts out Clemson. Now, Clemson had 182 yards of total offense in this game, and I think 50 or 60 of them came at the end when it was a 3-possession game. They just gave it to them. Complete domination by an Alabama defense who was down a couple starters.
I think we all should have seen this coming. You cannot give Nick Saban a month of telling him and his team that you don't belong here, you don't deserve to be in the playoff. You can't give them a month of that scenario, especially against an offense like Clemson that was one-dimensional. I mean, they were one-dimensional all year. Now you get Alabama healthy, you get them a little mad, and see what happens, 24-6, and that doesn't even tell the tale of how dominant the Alabama defense was.
Well, the defense is the story. Offensively, I think, you know, if you want to point the finger as far as being critical about anything you saw last night with Alabama, offensively, you know, they didn't move the ball the way they would have liked to, but here's the thing. Jalen Hurts is 25-2 as a starter. Do you know what LSU and South Carolina and some of these other schools, in Florida, for God's sakes, Tennessee, what they would do to have a Jalen Hurts at quarterback? I don't understand the criticism of this guy when all he does is win football games and do what he's supposed to do, and he doesn't turn the ball over.
Well, here's the thing. It's a national championship program.
Sure.
It is. And fairly or unfairly, until you win a national championship as a quarterback, I don't think you're going to be as accepted. Now, has he been a good player for Alabama? Absolutely. Has he been a great player for Alabama at times? Absolutely. But has he had problems against elite defenses? Sure. But now he has an opportunity, his second opportunity to win a national title.
I do want to tell the viewers at home, we did face the helmets towards one another. There's some issues, you know, at times where people text in there, they're not happy with and people are showing concern about the Mississippi State helmet, that they can't see it, that you're blocking the view. Was that part of your strategy?
No, Mississippi State's right here. This is Arkansas.
Oh, you moved Ole Miss out of the way.
Right.
You moved Ole Miss out
I
of the
did.
way.
I very much moved it. I sure did.
So Nick Saban gets it done again. You know, same old story, but I think people are... To me, Clemson was a great football team, and I think that they just made it look so easy that we're kind of disregarding that. Just how good Alabama. You see what I'm saying here?
They are. People are acting like Georgia and Alabama were handed this, but Georgia beat Oklahoma in one of the greatest games in college football history. Alabama knocked off the defending national champion and did it in dominating style. I know Kelly Bryant, and I know that offense are not all that great, and they were just good enough this year to out-athlete people. You're not out-athleting Alabama. So taking anything away from Alabama or Georgia at this point would just be fool's gold. It would be foolish, and I don't see why anybody would do it. Alabama, Georgia, playing the best right now, the two best teams in the country, and it's an all-ACC national title.
Deron Payne, your MVP of the Sugar Bowl last night, big defensive tackle, gets the big interception, scores a touchdown. 14 seconds later, they use him down on the goal line as a tight end. Big fella showing the soft hands. He gets a touchdown. Unbelievable performance by him.
What about the toe tap? You talk about the soft hands, he catches the ball and then taps his toes. I mean, he got 3 feet in bounds, and this is for a guy that's 308 pounds and just had an interception. I didn't think he was going to go down on the interception. It took a horse collar to get him to the ground, but, you know, that's just that dominant Alabama defensive line. Raekwon Davis, Deron Payne, Hand, I mean, all of those guys took turns, making plays last night, and it was incredible.
We'll talk to Brandon Adams here in just a moment, but do want to remind you guys we are brought to you by AT&T, mobilizing your world each and every day here on SEC Country. And the game is all set for Monday at 8 o'clock, and Vegas wasted no time releasing the point spread. We'll take a look here. RJ Bell, Vegas Insider, released the spread last night. Alabama -5.5. Brandon, why this is interesting to me is that it's already down to Alabama -4, Georgia +4, so it's moved to 1.5 points in the last 12 hours.
Well, you got Georgia fans who are buying up every ticket in the world, and I bet they're firing up Las Vegas right now. They're putting as much money down as they can. Listen, I don't know about the point spread. I don't know what it's going to mean come Monday night. I don't know what it will be. I know that this is going to be a war, not a football game. It's going to be incredible. If you're into that sort of thing, if you're into the point spread, Alabama coming out at that big of a number, it's very interesting to me. I just don't know. That seems like a very big number, 5.5.
So here's the other. It's 4. The line's down to 4 now.
But it started at 5.5, though, right?
Yeah, it started at 5.5. Now it's down to 4. What interests me most about this is the total is 45. So Vegas, you know, they're telling you right now they believe it's going to be a low-scoring game, as we both do, but 45 is a small amount of points. I will say this, going back to the show leading into the Rose Bowl that we did yesterday morning, our Bud Light prediction show, talking about the total in the Rose Bowl yesterday at 61 points. And I went on to pick Georgia to win the game 38-35. And my co-host said, well, how is Georgia going to win the game if it's high scoring like that? You know, don't you think if Jake Fromm throws the ball over 25 times, it doesn't pose well for them? Well, it turned out that Vegas was right, 61 points. It was going to be a high scoring game, and Georgia -3. So Georgia was going to win in a high scoring game. So these guys know what's going on. So the fact that they like Alabama in a low scoring game shouldn't be shocking to many.
No, it shouldn't be shocking. The momentum Georgia came out with after that game, after beating Oklahoma, which I think Oklahoma, it seemed like they had more momentum than anybody coming into this game. The fact that they have momentum coming out and then being a 5.5 underdog in Atlanta. Of course, I guess that's not really an advantage for anybody. But I guess the number just shocked me. Not the over/under. I think that makes a lot of sense because these defenses are going to take it to each other, and I don't think it's going to be like Alabama LSU in 2011, which was very low scoring.
Right.
But it's going to be like that in a physical manner. It's going to be rough out there.
We'll talk some more about that. Brandon Adams coming up in just a moment. Do you want to take some more of your comments on the Facebook Live as far as who you're rooting for? If you're not a Georgia fan, you're not an Alabama fan, you're a fan of a said SEC school, and you're the outsider. Why do you just want to see a good game? Do you want to see Alabama fall? We'll get to some of your comments in just a moment. You mentioned the ticket demand.
I did.
Okay. My buddy went out there to the Rose Bowl. He said, I got a $2,500 budget for 2 tickets. I've already looked at the prices. If Georgia wins, I'm going to scoop up 2. I got bad news for you, brother. You might get 1 ticket for that, as Georgia fans literally broke the internet and StubHub. Take a look right here, as these tickets, the game being played in Atlanta, are in high demand. And right now, we're looking at $2,100 if you can show the cheapest tickets available as of now, $2,090 a piece, 15 tickets available at the very top of the stadium. I'd be willing to bet at kickoff it's going to be even worse than that.
Yeah, it probably is. This was a perfect storm, was it not? It's in Atlanta. Georgia fans have been waiting for this for decades. They've been waiting for this for years. They finally got it, and they're playing Alabama, who's 2 hours down the road? It's a perfect storm, and if you can get in, you've got more money than I got. That's all I can tell you.
I would, honest to God, I'd rather watch it at home. I really would rather watch it at home than be caught up in all that mess. It's just going to be a complete you know what down there.
It will, but the first year at Mercedes-Benz Stadium,
it's going to be
Georgia gets to play
man.
in it. I mean, it's like it was destined to happen.
It's an SEC championship on steroids.
In Atlanta. Like they built this stadium especially for this game. That's what it feels like.
Speaking about performance-enhancing drugs, we reach out to our phone line. Brandon Adams standing by, still out in Los Angeles, probably still high off of that Rose Bowl victory. How you doing? How's the voice? What's the last 24 hours been like for you as a Georgia fan and a member of the media?
Yeah, you know, it's been obviously a tremendous honor to even be a part of it. It was a great game to get a chance to see. As you guys know, one of the real just special bowl games that's probably ever been played. I think a lot of the Rose Bowl folks are trying to chronicle in their minds where it ranks with some of the great games that have taken place in that stadium. And it's going to end up being up high on that list. And obviously, as a guy that's grown up, you know, rooting for the Dogs and being, you know, following that program closely, that's a special day for me in that sense as well, because, you know, this is obviously a time that Georgia fans have kind of craved for quite some time. They've seen every one of their neighbors, whether it be Alabama, Auburn, Florida, even ACC teams like Florida State, Clemson, you know, all these Southern teams in recent years have kind of reached up and grabbed the national championship. Georgia has not, as of yet, been able to do that, but with the win against Oklahoma, maybe the opportunity lies here ahead for the Dogs come Monday night.
Hey, Brandon Walker here. Listen, it was 31-14 in the first half. Georgia with the incredible comeback, the momentum, playing physical. What did it feel like to see Georgia fight back and show that championship medal in the Rose Bowl like that?
Well, obviously it was a really impressive performance. And, you know, I think that in the first half, the issue was, you know, as good as Baker Mayfield is, and he's obviously a tremendous quarterback, he's justifiably the Heisman Trophy winner. But the issue for Georgia wasn't so much Mayfield as it was the rushing yards that Georgia was allowing. Because the fact of the matter is, there's only so much you can do against a good quarterback like Mayfield, against a spread offense that's sort of designed to compile yards and designed to, you know, compile points. They're going to get some of theirs in that. But Georgia was giving up too many rushing yards in the first half. And so once he was able to kind of lock that down at least a bit and kind of get back to, you know, feeling a little bit more like Georgia in the second half, then obviously that was a really fun ride. And you knew that Georgia was going to be able to score some in the second half that would, you know, give it a chance to sort of stay within shouting distance. It was just a matter of, can it find a few stops, and the Dogs were able to do that.
Brandon, I think the biggest question going into this championship game, not so much for Alabama, but for the Georgia Bulldogs, is coming off of this emotional high and what many are considering one of the greatest football games ever played, getting in an airplane, losing a day of practice, flying across the country, getting in a bus, going to Atlanta, everything that goes into that, and being prepared to play the most prepared team historically and one of the greatest coaches in football programs ever in 6 days from now. It's a big task at hand.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Hines. I think that you're right. I think there is an emotional toll, I guess is the better phrase, emotional toll that comes from being in a game like this where there's a sort of a frenetic pace, a bunch of points being scored, a lot of emotion. I think that you leave a part of you in Pasadena if you're Georgia after something like that. Doesn't mean that Georgia can't get back up for Alabama, but I do think it's a little tougher. I also think that Georgia, being in the Pacific time zone, having to come back essentially overnight last night to get into back into the state of Georgia early this morning, is a little bit of a challenge in comparison to Alabama, which played in New Orleans, went back to Tuscaloosa, which is sort of within the same time zone. So I do think that Georgia's got a little extra work to ready itself for Monday. I think that Kirby Smart, you didn't see this on TV or during the press conference, but in the locker room after the game, he was a little edgy. You know, he was certainly a little nervous about getting his team back on the bus as quickly as possible so they could go ahead and get that rest started. I think he's aware, because of the time that he spent in Alabama in these sort of championship situations, that, you know, Georgia's time crunch this week. It's that he'll rest things. It's got to, put a game plan in place for Alabama, and I think that Kirby, as well as anybody, knows that trying to do all that over the course of this is going to be as a.
All right, we lost Brandon there. Brandon, you still there, buddy?
Yes, sir. I am. I said what I was going to finish with is that what's going to help in this bowl game situation is the fact that you're not going to have as many of the same kind of stuff you have with the bowl game. You're not going to have, you know, a lot of events and PR moments. You're going to have a pretty short schedule when it comes to that. So most of this will be spent doing just practice.
Let me ask you, Brandon, are you prepared for the change in relationship between you and your co-host, Mike Johnson? Because you know how that guy gets. I know how you get. I mean, it's a big game Monday night. Are you guys prepared for the divorce?
It is funny. We've already kind of exchanged a little bit of stuff on social media back and forth, and some of our viewers of the show are sort of trying to stir it up between us already. Listen, Mike and I, we have a strong relationship. We're not going to let one foot.
We're losing Brandon, but I will say this:
one football game.
I'm sorry, Brandon. We're cutting in and out here. Thank you so much for calling in. He can say what he wants to say about their relationship. Right. It's going to be quality entertainment the next 3 days.
Oh, it'll be very good. You need to watch that because those two guys, tomorrow might be fine, but by Friday they're going to be at each other's throats. I guarantee you.
Is Brandon gone? He's gone. All right. Yeah. Sorry, some kind of phone issue there, but appreciate Brandon being part of it. Listen, since we started the show, everybody's been writing on Facebook, when are you going to talk about what happened to Auburn? When are you going to talk about UCF? Don't worry. We'll get there. We're almost there.
That is the topic of conversation. We got some UCF fans that have infiltrated.
We're almost there. But to kind of support that, when we laid out the rundown on the show, Twitter, America, people are not happy about what we've got in the SEC Championship. Sorry, the All-SEC National Championship. Excuse me if I called the SEC Championship. Twitter reacted yesterday. Let's take a look at some of the tweets about the College National Championship being set. This is from Nathan Kerr. It says, so the College Football Playoff was created in response to an All-SEC title game, of course, going back to 2011, Brandon. And now in the College Football Player era, we got an All-SEC title game. Real quick, I'll say this about both games. LSU and Alabama were the two best teams in the country, and then that year, Georgia and Alabama were the two best teams in the country. This year, I don't know what else you want.
My question is, how can you complain about it? The ACC champ had their shot.
Right.
The Big 12 champ had their shot. Right. Ohio State blew their shot by losing 55.
A couple teams didn't get their shot.
UCF, we'll get to that. We'll get to that a little bit later. But as it is constructed, 4 teams got a shot. The 2 teams that succeeded, the 2 teams that played like championship teams, happen to be from the SEC. That ain't our fault. That's yours.
Steve Warner says UCF and Danny Cannell can get together and have a love fest. Danny Cannell, what can you say about his hate that he has for the SEC? This is one of a series of tweets from Danny Cannell. He went on and on and on. I don't even know that he slept last night. He's so upset about this. This is so bad for college football. Fans are really going to see through the farce we call playoffs and realize it's a rigged system designed to benefit the elites. Just stop it. Please stop it, Danny Cannell.
At some point, he was given the shtick to do this, and I think he's just gone overboard.
That's exactly right.
Listen, was it a big deal when the Lakers and Celtics were playing every year for the title in the 80s? No, it was awesome. You know why? Because those were the 2 best teams.
Right.
And the playoff is designed to produce the 2 best teams. Well, guess what? One happens to be in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The other happens to be in Athens, Georgia. That's all there is to it.
Right. Aaron Torres, who is with The Athletic, he's one of the people last night that actually took the report to support the playoff and the fact that we have the championship game the way it is. Everyone can have fake angst about having an all-SEC final, but the simple truth is tonight proves the committee got it right. A fully healthy Bama was and is a significantly better team than Ohio State. Good for the committee for giving us the 4 best teams, and that's their job, Brandon.
Props to Aaron for using all 280 characters there for that incredibly long tweet, but he's right. I mean, Alabama proved the committee right. Alabama didn't just beat Clemson, the defending national champions. They took them out back and beat them behind the woodshed. They beat them to death. They beat them to sleep. And Ohio State can say what they want. The committee got it right, period.
All right, well, we do... Real quick before we get to the UCF thing, I do want to mention if you're looking to make a little extra money on that college football playoff game, we talked about it earlier, Alabama -4, the total is 45. Go to mybookie.ag. What are you waiting for? Make a deposit. They'll match your deposit for 100%. That's what I call free money. Now, what you do with it, that's up to you, but you can do in-game betting. You can do proposition bets. There'll be a ton of props for the game. How many times does Nick Saban smile during the game?
3.
3? Over, under 3? You going over?
3.5. 3.5.
Okay, we're going to have some great fun with Saban at the expense of him later as we get to our champion alive here in just a moment. But don't forget mybookie.ag for all your betting needs. All right, there was Baker Mayfield. We didn't talk a lot about his performance. Was he sick? We kind of touched on it a little bit. But, setting the tone, just the way he is, the way he talks to the media, the way his brashness on the field. And, after the game, everybody's shaking hands, and Davin Bellamy says this to the Heisman Trophy winner. Hey, couldn't have said it any better myself.
You know, we all have different ways we go about doing things. You know, the way you prepare for this might be different than the way I prepare for it. Baker Mayfield, apparently, to get going in competition, he has a way he carries himself.
Right.
And it rubs competitors the wrong way. It rubs some fans the wrong way. But that's who Baker Mayfield has been the last couple of years. But I don't blame somebody like Davin Bellamy. When you act like
No
that,
doubt.
when you bring that, it's going to come back to you. If you lose a game, it's going to come back to you. When you do a throat slash and say it's over in the second quarter, and it's not, it's coming back to you, and that's what it did. I have no problem with what Davin Bellamy did.
I'm glad you mentioned the throat slash, going back to the second quarter. That's just a part of who he is. He can't help himself. But here's the thing about Baker Mayfield, and I look more and more into this. He's just that guy. You know, if he's on your team, you really, really like him. If you're playing against him, you can't stand the guy. But I think he's really pushing a fine line with what's acceptable, what's too much. I mean, we got video of him here walking into the stadium prior to the Rose Bowl, and there's, you know, we don't have it, but he's holding a sign that says Pretenders. And of course, that goes back to Lee Corso's analysis of the Oklahoma Sooners before the season, thinking that they weren't going to repeat as Big 12 champions, and Mayfield took that as a little bit of motivating factor throughout the season. But you don't need to carry a freaking billboard into the damn game.
No,
it's look at me, come on.
That's 100% what it is, and I will say this. If you are going to do a throat slash, if you're going to say it's over, you better make sure it's over. Because if you don't, you open yourself up to ridicule. And a lot of the things he's done outside of his playing ability, which is fantastic, has opened himself up to ridicule. And losing this game helped his cause 0%.
And, you know, on our Facebook Live feed, people, you know, backing up Baker Mayfield. A lot of people can't stand him, and that's who he is. He's a polarizing figure. I really don't have that big of a problem with it. It'll be interesting to see how the draft scouts, not to get off of how they view him as a quarterback in the National Football League, because the comparisons to Johnny Manziel are not fair. He's not a knucklehead off the field. He doesn't have those problems. He works his tail off in the film room. I mean, he's a real bookworm when it comes to studying the game. It's just his physical attributes that might limit him at the next level.
Very much so, and I'm not sure some of the things that fly as a big man on campus at Oklahoma are going to fly as a rookie in the National Football League. You don't have to humble yourself in the National Football League. It'll get done for you. So I'm not sure his skill set really translates to the NFL, but that's a different discussion for another day.
All right, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's not the Alabama Crimson Tide going back. It's what happened to the Auburn Tigers here in Atlanta at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl yesterday. UCF, the only undefeated team in college football, they run the table. They win every game they're supposed to. They come in as 10.5-point underdogs to the Auburn Tigers, who Kerryon Johnson was 100%, and they lose the game.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. I mean, they really let the conference down as a whole. That's on you, War Eagle.
We're disappointed in you, Auburn.
Very disappointed in you.
Bad Auburn. But listen, I didn't see it coming. I really thought UCF was going to come in that game. They were going to be pumped up. Kudos to Scott Frost for seeing his thing all the way through, by the way.
No doubt.
Not a lot of coaches do it. Kudos to him for doing that. But I
just feel like walk out in the middle of the season. Steve Spurrier.
I just feel like Auburn completely no-showed that game. And they kind of did that a couple times this year. Gus Malzahn found a way to lose games he shouldn't lose. I'm talking about the second half in Baton Rouge, and I'm talking about the entire game against UCF. Is UCF a better football team than Auburn? No, they are not.
No.
But UCF was ready to play, and they won the football game.
It was another big football game that the Auburn Tigers lost on a big stage that wasn't played at Jordan-Hare. They win them at home for the most part, and when you put them in a bowl game or you put them on the road, they can't get it done. And I think it was like they looked at the UCF defense, and they felt like at any point during the game, even late in the game, it was a two-score game, they went right down the field and scored. I think that was the mentality of their quarterback, their offense, that they could just score anytime they wanted to, and UCF just made enough plays to keep them in it, and then they made Auburn's defense look pedestrian.
And the reality is, was Auburn ready to play? It's Gus Malzahn's job to make sure they're ready to play. I don't think they were. And again, I think you're right. I think they thought they could just turn it on like that, and it never really happened, and UCF was on from the beginning. Listen, the last thing I want to do in the world is belittle UCF winning this football game.
No, you
because
can't.
It was a Peach Bowl. It was a big stage. They finished 13-0. But come on, Auburn. Come on.
Stidham throws that pick six, which basically was the final nail in the coffin. I don't know who in the world he was throwing to, but everything.
I know who he was throwing to. The UCF linebacker. It's very clear to see who he was throwing to.
So with all that being said, if you're going to have an argument for the college football playoff committee, and maybe they didn't get it right, the Ohio State, Alabama, that's a separate argument. Let's just put that in a box and set it away. UCF, to me, maybe they have a legitimate argument. Is this something that the committee revisits in the offseason?
Should UCF have been in the college football playoff? Is that what you're proposing to me right now?
I'm saying in the future, should they revisit it if there's an undefeated team and you leave them out and they win their bowl game over what was it's tough, man. What are they supposed to do?
I'm just going to say, laugh out loud, no. Because
schedule somebody non-conference?
Schedule somebody.
Right.
Play somebody. I mean, their best win coming into yesterday was Memphis, and they beat them twice. Decent little win, but their best win by far was yesterday against a checked-out Auburn. Listen, I understand they beat Auburn, and that's great. They finished 13-0, and they get to have all these conversations, and they get to say we were perfect, nobody else was. But Georgia played Notre Dame. They played Auburn twice. They played Oklahoma. I mean, the schedules do not match up at all. So until you schedule somebody, if you're a non-Power 5 team and you think you're going to be good, you need to know you have to go above and beyond in scheduling. Otherwise, you're hamstringing yourself, and that's what UCF did.
That's what they did. And it'll be interesting to see moving forward if they're able to schedule some of these potentially home and home, neutral site games to start the season. That's where you try to get them in to fit them in. But, hey, man, Scott Frost, the job he did, don't forget, 2 years ago, 0-12.
0-12.
Last year, 2016, they win 6 games to become bowl eligible. This year, they were on the table.
And guess what? Scott Frost is gone.
Yeah.
But Josh Heupel's going to be a heck of a coach, too.
Yeah, they missed him in Missouri in that bowl game against Texas in the Texas Bowl.
The play calling wasn't not so great. So Josh Heupel, I don't think they're going to fall off very far. But if you want to be a national player, be a national player. Now, 2 years ago, they were 0-12. Could they have seen this coming? Probably not. But still, if you want to be a national player, treat yourself like a national player, and then the rest of the teams or the rest of the fans will accept you as such.
We knew all season long, Brandon, that the SEC was top-heavy. It was Alabama, it was Georgia, it was Auburn, and then you had a couple teams stuck there in the middle, your LSUs, whatnot. Mississippi State as well. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant to say Mississippi State before I said LSU.
Let's just roll on. You're good.
Okay. But this is it. Not only is it top-heavy, you have some really bad teams at the bottom of the league, but it's as top-heavy as it gets when you're talking about the best 2 teams in the nation. And they are the best 2 teams in the nation. You can't argue that. The only person that can stand up and have an argument to this is UCF, and even that is a ridiculous argument.
It's not a good argument. But the SEC is top-heavy, and it's good to be top-heavy when those 2 teams are playing for a national title.
Right.
It's not like the top of your conference is playing in the Chicken Wing Bowl or something else. These 2 teams are playing for a national championship. Is it top-heavy? Sure. I think there are 5 good teams in the SEC. That's what I think. I think the top 2. I think Auburn was a good team.
I agree.
I think LSU was a pretty good team, and I think Mississippi State with a healthy Nick Fitzgerald was a really good team. Past that. Are you laughing? Why are you laughing?
I just knew. I can't believe you saved it for last.
They beat LSU by 30.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I think the line stops there. I think South Carolina not that good, although they did finish 9-4. And then after that, just some teams that just did not play very well. Texas A&M very disappointing this year. Kentucky disappointing, and Missouri got all the way to the Texas Bowl. And then had that performance. Just very disappointing.
Yeah, South Carolina with their big win, obviously momentum going the other way. I wonder how this affects the momentum with the Auburn football program. I think Auburn fans are saying to themselves, same old, same old. Here they are. They get all excited. They beat back-to-back #1 teams in the country in their own backyard. And here they are. They come to the Peach Bowl and they give up how many? 38 points? 35 points?
If you were Auburn,
come on.
If you're an Auburn fan today, all right, okay. You've got a team this year that proved it is capable of beating the best teams in the country. If you're an Auburn fan, who do you hate? You hate Alabama
and Georgia.
And you hate Georgia.
And they're playing each other for the national championship. And you beat both of them.
Does that sting a little bit?
You beat both of them.
That absolutely stings. I mean, and you beat. I just can't imagine being an Auburn fan today. I just feel like Auburn left so much money on the table this year.
Auburn fans, how you feeling? Write us into the Facebook Live. We'll get your comments out on the show. I also want to get your take on if you're not a Georgia fan, you're not an Alabama fan, who are you pulling for in this game? You're a Florida fan, who's you got?
Patricia Crabb on Facebook Live says, Auburn can still say we had a good year, a bad bowl game, but we won the Iron Bowl in all caps. I mean, if you want to hang on to that, you certainly can hang on to that. You beat the national champ, I can tell you that much right now.
Yeah.
But you also could be playing in that game.
Well, you know, it's a doomsday scenario. I don't want to say doomsday scenario. It's like an elephant in the circus when you talk about Alabama defensive players. What do they say when an elephant gets hurt in the circus? You just put him out back, you put another one in there, nobody knows the difference. But at this point, the war of attrition is real with the Alabama linebacking core. Anthony Jennings goes down in I don't want to call it a garbage time play, but the game was over at this point. Replays, he's scheduled for an MRI this afternoon. I'm not a doctor. I just know your leg's not supposed to bend this way. He was probably the best defensive player on the field last night. That's saying a lot. 3 tackles for a loss, a sack, 5 tackles in the game, led the team in all those categories. I don't know whether he's going to play in the championship game, but this is another blow to an Alabama defense at the linebacker position.
What made Alabama closer to average in November was the defensive attrition. I mean, they were a different team in September than they were in November, and they kind of limped through November. They limped through Starkville. They limped through Auburn. They got beat. But it was because of the injuries at the linebacker level. They were playing guys that shouldn't have been playing. Well, now last night you lose Anthony Jennings possibly. And the thing that makes this a big deal, I believe, is you got to make Jake Fromm play like a freshman Monday night. And to do that, you got to get a pass rush on him. Oklahoma really couldn't do it very well. Alabama and Anthony Jennings could possibly do it. If he's out, it's going to make it a little bit tougher. I think that's a big loss for Alabama.
I agree, too. We don't know. We're speculating at this point. Dylan Moses, Sean Deion Hamilton. I mean, these are guys that, you know, were supposed to be key cogs of this Alabama defense, and they're not going to be there. So, I mean, we wish the best to kid. I want Alabama to be as close to 100% for the championship game, but it's just it's almost like Kenny from South Park if you're a linebacker at Alabama right now. They're just finding bizarre ways to get hurt.
That being said, I don't think I saw as impressive a game from Alabama's defensive line as I saw last night. Payne, Hand, Raekwon Davis, and then the defensive secondary. They were awesome. Tony Brown was good. Mika Fitzpatrick. Are there 4 or 5 Mika Fitzpatricks? Because he is everywhere. Like, we talk about the linebacker injuries, and it is a significant thing, but the rest of the Alabama defense was amazing last night, probably better than I've seen them all year.
You mentioned Tony Brown. We'll talk about him right now as far as what motivated him and this Alabama team for this rematch against Clemson, 3rd year straight, the rubber match, however you want to bill it. But we'll pull up the quote here. I think this is very interesting. I'm going to elaborate on this a little. He says, I love Dabo for all the ammunition he gave this team, man. He gave this team a lot of ammunition to come to play this game and ready to dominate every play. Told us we weren't ready, told us we weren't worthy of being a top 4 team. Look, that's what happens when you talk trash to us. We're going to show you. Now, we'll say this just real quick to preface this. What he's talking about is this didn't come from the coaching staff. This is from the leaders of that locker room, the upperclassmen. They got wind that Dabo Swinney in his final college football coaches poll put Alabama as the 5th best team in the country, and he felt that Ohio State was more deserving because of the fact they won their conference championship, and they found that out in the locker room, and that was their bullboard material.
Listen, football is a very rough game, and it takes a very rough person to play it, and it takes motivation to get on the field. If you take motivation in Dabo doing that, if you take that and want to go out there and
they played with an edge last night, so it worked.
They were angry. They were angry. So whatever you got to do to fuel you, go ahead. I'm not sure Dabo Swinney was trying to disrespect anybody.
I don't think he'll do it again.
He probably won't do it again. No, he definitely will not. But that's still a very minuscule nugget to pull out and to motivate yourself with. But again, football's a rough game, and you take whatever you got to take.
I'm reading this, in the fact that what struck me the most about this is that it didn't come from the coaching staff. It was from the upperclassmen, the guys that played on that team last year that were key contributors of that loss, especially a guy on the defensive side of the ball who might find themselves responsible for giving up that last-minute drive to Deshaun Watson, who Kelly Bryant is not, by the way. We found that out as well last night. But the fact that the players in the locker room are the ones that kind of are in charge of things. And I think that's when you know you got a guy like Nick Saban who's obviously doing things right. You don't have to delegate. You don't have to worry about that when you have the right guys in the locker room. And I'll take the blueprint and I'll take Kirby and I'll put him over in Athens, and you got the Lorenzo Carters, you got the Bellamy's, you got the Chubbs, you got the Michelles. It's the same thing. He doesn't have to worry about filtering messages down because he has those guys in the locker room that he trusts.
Let me see if I get the old saying right. On bad teams, nobody leads. On good teams, the coaches lead. And on great teams, the players lead.
Right.
That might be present right here.
Did you just come up with that?
I did not.
Really good.
I have read it other places, but I'll write it down. Maybe we'll trademark it. Anyway, that's very true, though, isn't it? On great teams, Nick Saban doesn't have to be the leader. The players lead themselves. The players know what it takes. They know what it takes to be championship material. I've seen that out of Georgia this year, too.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you hear some of the comments, and I thought, after the game, the Kirby Smart interview with Maria Taylor, I thought he was stone-faced, and my wife said, She goes, why isn't he excited? Why? And I'm thinking to myself, I said, okay, that's Nick Saban because he can't show his players or anybody on that staff that he's here when their goal is this. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you what impressed me the most about Kirby Smart yesterday? It was 31-14 in the first half, and I thought the Georgia coaches were doing a bad job. I really did. I thought the offensive play calling was suspect. I thought the defense was just shying away from it. I didn't know what was happening. It just felt like the coaches were doing a bad job. It's 31-17 at the half. Kirby walks up to Maria Taylor, and she says, what's going on? He says, the coaching staff did a bad job.
Right.
We did not do a very good job getting these guys ready. And coming out of the second half, boom, Georgia's off and running. They got it right in the second half. Kirby was a leader in that moment. He said, listen, it's on the coaches. We'll get it fixed. 30 more minutes, and there you go. Georgia's playing for a national title.
Jeremy Pettis wrote in, and this is, I don't know how factual this is, he's saying that the players basically made their own curfew. I mean, that you want to talk about when you've established a program, and I don't know that, I just throw said school out there. I don't know if they're playing in a game of this magnitude and they're letting their players make their own curfews.
No, and it was always a bad idea in my house when they let me make the curfew. Of course, I made it like never.
Right.
And of course, look where I ended up, sitting here with him. So that was a terrible idea, Mom. Thanks.
Well, she did a good job. You're a good guy.
She was okay.
Yeah, she did a good job. So it's interesting to me on how they got motivated for this game. Obviously, great senior leadership, upperclassmen leadership in both of these games. We are brought to you by AT&T, mobilizing your world around you here on SEC Country Live. And last but not least, let's talk about that 2011 game because that was the worst nightmare for the college football, the old BCS formula. The fans didn't want it. TV ratings were down. It was a 9-6 regular season game. It was a slobber knocker affair. To me, I enjoyed it because I knew what I was getting into and I was looking for the big hits. Yeah. I wasn't looking for a Rose Bowl shootout like I saw. I appreciated it, but they come up with this playoff thing to kind of get rid of that. Lo and behold, here we are back again with two SEC teams.
First of all, I'm glad you said that. That 9-6 regular season game, one of my favorite games of all time.
It was a bloodbath.
It was terrible out there. I mean, it just looked rough. I mean, people just get carted off. Anyway, one of my favorite games. But the thing about that 2011 national title game, it was a rematch.
And you don't beat Nick Saban twice.
Well, but this is not a rematch.
Right.
This is an all-SEC game that has not been played. I mean, Alabama hasn't played Georgia. It's not like it's a rematch of the SEC title game. This is fresh, it's new, and both offenses are better than both offenses were back then. And Georgia's playing in Atlanta. There's just so many ingredients here that are superior to that 2011 game. And I know nationally you came up with the 4-team playoff to avoid what happened. Well, guess what? Here we are, SEC country, talking about an all-SEC championship again. Hi, guys.
Well, the TV ratings for that game were down. What do you think what do you think the national audience, if you're a casual, if you're an Oregon fan, are you tuning into this?
I think they'll be better, again, because that was a rematch.
Of a 9-6 game.
And the first game was 9-6. Nobody thought it would be exciting.
Right.
And frankly, the second game wasn't all that exciting. I mean, Alabama kind of choked LSU out. 21-0 was the final. I think it was 9-0 forever. I mean, so it wasn't really an exciting game. I think this one, based on what Georgia did yesterday and one of the most exciting college football games we have ever seen, I think that adds a lot more TV-friendly material for this game.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look ahead. I mean, we know the kickoff's set at 8 o'clock next week at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium between Georgia and Alabama for all the Marbles National Championship. What are your initial takes on the game? Who do you like? What kind of game do you think we're going to see?
Going into yesterday, my pick to win the national championship was Alabama.
Right.
Because I thought you give him a month, you give Nick Saban a month, and tell him he shouldn't have made the playoff, he's going to win that national title. I didn't think any teams were elite. But after watching what Georgia showed, after watching the mettle Georgia showed in the second half and coming back and beating the Heisman winner in a shootout, I don't know how you go against a team that seems like it's a team of destiny. It's the first time they've been here in a long time. Kirby Smart, former Nick Saban guy, and you get to play in Atlanta. Doesn't it feel like it's written for Georgia?
It really does. And you go all the way back to prior to the Auburn game, right? You're undefeated. You're going into Auburn. I just had a feeling they were going to lose that game. And I felt like it would be a good thing for them to lose that game because they would be battle-tested in a road SEC game, which is always a good thing if you're going to play in bigger stages moving forward, which turned out to be true. But I thought you needed Auburn to beat Alabama, and that happened as well, to play them in a rematch, playing the same team, twice in Atlanta for a chance to go to the college football playoff. As an SEC 11-win team, it was a no-brainer they were in. I thought they got a favorable matchup in a game against Oklahoma just because of the contrast to styles of the conferences and whatnot. I thought they would win that game. I thought Alabama would beat Clemson in a rematch of last year because of the no Deshaun Watson factor. Everything that I thought would happen up until this point has pretty much happened with a Georgia-Alabama national title game going on. I'm still up in the air. I think Alabama's the better team, but I will say this, and this was my point. I was talking to a friend this morning, is that it just seems like there's something magical going on with this Georgia Bulldog team in this season. It's incredible.
I'm up in the air too. And prior to yesterday, I was all Alabama winning the national title, but I am completely up in the air. Alabama has to make Jake Fromm play like a freshman. Oklahoma's defense wasn't built to do that. Is Nick Saban going to lose 2 national title games in a row? I don't feel like he is. But is Georgia going to get beat in Atlanta in their first national title game in decades? I can't say that they are. It's really the most exciting possible game we could have gotten. I will probably go back and forth 12 times. If you made me pick a team right now, give me Alabama.
Well, you can't go wrong with that. It's a safe bet. You go back the last, 9 years that Saban's been doing this. You have the kick six. There was Ezekiel Elliott going crazy.
Right.
They could have won it every year. I mean, you could make an argument.
Last year.
Right. Deshaun Watson doesn't drive him down the field and throw the ball 55 times or whatever he does. You got a chance to win that football game. But Jake Fromm is not Deshaun Watson. He's not capable of throwing the ball 50 times. I just don't see it. Can they run the ball against Alabama? That's the big question.
Well, with Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, if you're going to run the ball against Alabama, you have the ingredients. I mean, it's not like you're running a couple of 180-pound freshmen out there. You got grown men running the football. You got grown men who did a great job last night. Can they run against Alabama? I don't know. But can Jalen Hurts move the ball against Georgia's defense?
Right.
I mean, that's a legitimate question, too. Their defense is every bit the defense Alabama is. Lorenzo Carter, everybody on that defense, Roquan Smith. I mean, it's going to be very hard for Jalen Hurts to move the ball on them. So, I don't know. You could talk about this game over and over and over, and I know we will in the next week. It's going to be a very exciting matchup, but it's hard to bet against Nick Saban in this scenario.
Jake, guys is giving me a hard time. Says Jake Fromm can. This is from Jacobo Simba saying Jake Fromm can throw here. Get the hell out of here. I didn't say he couldn't throw. He's just not Deshaun Watson.
Right.
Now, at this point, he's not Deshaun Watson. I mean, that's my point. It takes something. Some unforeseen special circumstances on most occasions to beat Alabama. That's just how good they are.
And remember, Deshaun Watson didn't beat Alabama the first time either.
No.
So, I mean, it took his second time, and it took an amazing effort from him. That's not an insult. Jake Fromm's still a freshman quarterback, and he's a freshman quarterback who might be unlike any we've ever seen. But we saw last night, Nick Saban's defense was incredibly ready for Clemson. They'll be ready for Georgia. If Jake Fromm wins this game, he's a legend for all time.
Man, I just think it's so interesting, the storyline going into next year. Regardless of how this national championship game plays out for Georgia, with Justin Fields coming in, no other quarterback on the roster, you don't expect him to be redshirted. He's going to be on the active roster, a true competition going into camp. You're talking about possibly a true sophomore quarterback who just went 14-1 and won a national championship, and you're going to put him on the bench? I don't care who you are coming in here. That's almost unheard of.
No, Jake Fromm's going to be the starter as long as he is at Georgia. Here's an interesting wrinkle I see. You remember in the 2000s, Florida and LSU with Tebow and LSU, it was a national rivalry because there was always championship at stake. Right. Now Alabama, the last couple of years, it's just been so big. Alabama and LSU. Doesn't it seem like this is the beginning, the genesis of Georgia and Alabama fighting over the SEC for the next 5, 6, maybe 10 years?
It seems like that.
As long as Nick Saban is there, as long as Kirby Smart is building Alabama East. That's right. What he is doing.
And what's going to come with that are expectations, and what's going to come with that are people plucking his staff members. They lost a special teams coach today. Coach Fountain looks like he's going to be part of your Mississippi State staff, so congratulations on that.
He is. And it just, Kirby Smart is building something incredibly special at Georgia. The recruiting haul that he had this year was Saban-like, and it's going to be very, very interesting watching Saban and Saban Part 2 over the next 3 or 4 years. Sign me up for that.
So the one thing that I want to touch on Kirby Smart and the University of Georgia before we get out of here and show you today's Champion of Life, which features Nick Saban, which you're going to absolutely love, is the fact that he went to school there. I can't emphasize that enough. I used to cover Georgia football for CBS. So I was at every game under Rick, going up there, and I went to my first game this year under Kirby Smart. Every single dead ball, they are bringing out former players. They are bringing out academic achievements. They are bringing out guys from the swim team, whatever it is, paying homage to the university. And I'm sitting there surrounded by people who went to Georgia, and they say, you know what, man, that's awesome that he's doing that.
I'm surprised you noticed that. I went to a Georgia game this year, too, and by the third quarter, I was like, where are they getting all of these people?
Are they actors?
Where are they getting all these? They brought in a PGA guy who had finished his round in Atlanta like an hour earlier, and they helicoptered him in. I mean, Kirby Smart loves Georgia. It's very easy to see that, and that means something.
It does. And what made me think of that and go back to revisit my game, the trip up to Athens this year, was his conversation with Maria Taylor at the end of the game, where he was so emotional. He says, "Go Dogs," and you could tell it was like a. And then he said, she goes, "Thank you for doing it." He goes, "I did it for you too." Because she went to Georgia, of course, and so yeah, I mean that's his mindset.
And then he called her girl again.
Girl, that's right. He did call her girl. I was thinking, what's that all about?
We haven't talked about that, but I don't. That wasn't a big deal. I know people have tried to make a big deal. That's not a big deal, but it's kind of likable to see Kirby Smart succeeding. Anytime you see a coach succeeding at this level at his alma mater, it's just college football is really, really special.
Right.
And it means a lot. And to see him succeed at his alma mater, that's awesome.
Bobby says looking for anybody other than Alabama to win the championship if that means Georgia. So we'll take that. All right, it's time for our Champion of Life. You live it. You live it. You breathe it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Back to your mother and what a great job she did.
Thanks, Mom.
If it weren't for her, you wouldn't be a Champion of Life. Champion of Life today, Nick Saban. And we got a couple different ones. We'll start with his berating of his offensive coordinator, Brian Dubois. Look at this. I think most people have seen it by now. But this is what happens when you're up 3 scores in the fourth quarter and you throw the football and Nick Saban's your head coach. He's not done. Wait a second.
Right.
I mean, you shouldn't be throwing the ball. I don't blame him.
The announcers didn't pick up on it, why he was mad. They were acting like he wanted another touchdown. But no, he wanted to run out the clock.
Right.
And Dable threw the ball twice, and it was a rollout pass, and Hurts had to throw it away twice in a row.
Stop the clock.
Stop the clock. It just wasn't good. But credit to Brian Dable for sitting there and taking that, because when you're on Alabama staff, it's going to happen every now and then.
Did you see Lane Kiffin's?
I did.
Lane Kiffin, of course, couldn't leave that alone. He took to Twitter afterwards saying, this is what comes with the territory as being an offensive coordinator at Alabama. You should have known when you signed up for the job. In his own Kiffin way. I don't have it in front of me, but it was much funnier than that.
You get to play for a national title. You get to coach the best players in the country. Every now and then you get chewed out on national TV. It just is what it is.
Now, the last one to me, this made me laugh. I actually had to back up the DVR a couple times last night. Jalen Hurts scrambling out of bounds, takes out Coach Saban, and caught up in the heat of the moment. Watch his face here. Okay. Are you serious?
Right.
Like, he is so pissed off right now.
Right. And every player on Alabama's sideline tried to pick him up.
It is hilarious.
Yeah.
Watch it one more time. His face, he's so pissed. Like you're in a football game. Who hasn't been knocked over on the sidelines as a football game? It's like it hurts. It's like, come on, you okay, coach? I got you, man.
My question is, what was Saban looking at? The play's coming dead at him. What's he looking at? Does he think he has a Nick Saban force field around him? Which actually he might have it. He might have it. It might have just gone south on him. But that is hilarious, that look on his face.
How about him coming up to get the trophy after the game, the hat on backwards, a little bit of a smile, and then they started to walk off without the trophy. He says, hey, guys.
Right.
Don't forget the trophy. We came here to win a trophy. I'll just put that with the other 1,000 I have in our trophy.
You know, Nick Saban has shown signs of likability this year that it maybe hasn't shown in the past. I've always liked
the bar was set very low.
It was set very low, but he has shown some signs of humanness in the last couple of weeks. And anytime Nick Saban, the coaching robot, does that, it's always entertaining.
I'm telling you that I will watch that Nick Saban falling down a million times. Hey, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsors, AT&T, MyBookie. Don't forget to go to mybookie.ag to make a deposit. They'll match it. We'll get you all set for the championship game. Thanks to everybody behind the glass for helping out. As always, outstanding work. Thanks to all of our viewers. And thanks to Brandon Adams. He'll be back in the saddle, not tomorrow, but 2 days. Mike Johnson will be back tomorrow. I'll fill in for BA as we'll recap more Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl action. In the aftermath, that is an all-SEC championship game, which is going to bring great debate. It's going to be a lot of fun for us.
It's going to be a heck of a week.
You're the best. You're a champion of life yourself, Brandon.
Thanks, man.
Take care of yourself, brother.
That was awesome.
All right, guys. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. See you.